welcome to this deep dive. Today we're tackling a really interesting and ongoing situation in India,
Right.
the Mahabodhi liberation movement. We're going to explore what this is all about, focusing on the Mahabodhi Vihara in Bodhgaya.
Exactly. It's a socio-religious movement, but also political, and the core aim is pretty clear. Get the Mahabodhi Vihara back under Buddhist administration. It's a hugely important site for Buddhists everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely crucial. For anyone maybe less familiar, the Mahabodhi Temple, this is the spot, right, where Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, actually achieved enlightenment.
The very place. It doesn't get holier than that for Buddhists.
So it's kind of the #1 pilgrimage site?
Undisputed, yeah. And yet, the movement really highlights the central issue. For centuries, it hasn't been Buddhists in control. It's been under, Hindu control.
Which seems quite paradoxical given its significance.
It does, and that's what the Mahabodhi liberation movement wants to fix. Their main goals are basically getting those administrative rights back for the Buddhist community.
And preserving the heritage there.
And safeguarding the Buddhist heritage, yes, at this incredibly sacred location. Right now, the temple is managed by the Bodhgaya Temple Management Committee, the BTMC.
Okay.
And it does have both Hindu and Buddhist representatives on it.
So there's some Buddhist involvement.
There is, but the movement feels it's not enough. They're pushing for full Buddhist control. It's a struggle that, our sources indicate, was definitely active back in 1992, and it continues.
It makes you wonder, though, why is there this shared administration? How did it end up under Hindu control historically? Do we know much about that?
Well, the movement certainly contests the legitimacy of it now, but historically, there's a background.
Right.
Over long periods, especially times when Buddhism maybe wasn't as strong in India, the upkeep and management of sites like Mahabodhi, it often fell to local Hindu monastic orders or rulers.
Sort of by default, almost.
Kind of, and that historical reality sort of laid the groundwork for the admin structures we see later on.
Gotcha. So, okay, how did the modern pushback, this movement, how did it really start?
A really key moment, a turning point, you could say, was when Anagarika Dharmapala visited Bodhgaya. That was back in 1891.
Okay, what happened then?
Well, he went there and was apparently quite shocked, deeply struck by the temple's condition. And he immediately saw the need for, Buddhists to be involved in managing their holiest site. That visit was really the spark.
The spark that lit the fire, so to speak.
You could say that, absolutely, because just a few years after that, 1895, the Mahabodhi Society gets set up in Sri Lanka.
Directly because of his visit.
Directly resulting from what Dharmapala saw and his dedication to changing things. That was the beginning of the organized effort, really.
Okay, so the society forms, and then later we get this piece of legislation, the Bodhgaya Temple Act. Decades later, in 1949.
Yes, 1949. That act is super important to understand the current situation.
Also.
It officially created the Bodhgaya Temple Management Committee, the BTMC we mentioned.
The one that exists today?
The very same. And, while the act did say Buddhists had to be on the committee,
Yes.
the crucial part, the real sticking point, is that it also stipulated that the majority of members had to be Hindu.
I see. So even though Buddhists were included, they were structurally in the minority from the start by law.
Precisely. And that structure, set up by the 1949 Act, is still the main target for the Mahabodhi liberation movement today. It's what they fundamentally want to change.
Okay, that historical context and the legal framework really help. So bringing us up to date, what's happening on the ground? What are the current efforts like?
Well, according to the information we have, things have been quite active. There have been sustained protests.
Really? For how long?
The sources mentioned they'd been going for 76 days straight, starting back on February 12th.
76 days. That's serious dedication.
It really is. It shows a lot of resolve.
What kind of protests are we talking about? Sit-ins? Marches?
It seems initially there was a pretty intense 17-day hunger strike.
Wow. Where was that held?
Right in front of the temple itself. But then, after those 17 days, the protest site had to be moved.
Moved? Why?
The details aren't specified, but they relocated to a ground about 3 kilometers away from the temple.
Did that dampen the momentum at all? Moving further away?
Apparently not. What's interesting is the report suggests the movement kept its energy. They were still getting new people joining daily.
From where? Just locally?
From various parts of Bihar, the state where Bodhgaya is located. So, continuing influx.
It sounds incredibly organized, especially if it's lasting that long. What about logistics? feeding people, things like that?
Yeah, the scale sounds pretty significant. The info suggests they're providing daily meals, lunch, and dinner for maybe 300 to 400 participants.
Every single day.
Every day, plus afternoon snacks and tea.
That takes some serious coordination.
It really does. It points to a well-supported, committed group of people who are actively there, participating day in, day out.
And you mentioned the conditions.
Right. We also heard about the local climate. Temperatures hitting between 90 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oof. Protesting in that heat for months. That's tough.
Definitely underscores the commitment level we're talking about here.
So, okay, they're clearly determined. Looking forward, what's the strategy? What are they trying to achieve now? And how do they want supporters to help?
They seem to have a multi-pronged approach outlined. One big part is just encouraging more Buddhists to actually be at Bodhgaya.
Increase the physical presence.
Exactly. Motivating families, especially getting students and younger folks to visit. Also calling on retirees from the community to make the trip.
The idea being more visibility, more connection.
I think so, yeah. Making the Buddhist connection to the site more visible, more tangible on the ground, reinforcing that presence.
Makes sense. What else? Beyond just visits.
Political engagement is huge. They're stressing the need to lobby, basically.
With who?
With the current government, but also with opposition parties. Trying to build broad political backing, it seems.
Covering all bases.
Right. And they also talk about needing a separate, dedicated team just for agitation-focused efforts in places like Patna, the state capital, and even Delhi, the national capital.
Taking the fight to the political centers.
Seems like it. Getting endorsements from major political parties is listed as a critical goal, too.
So a real push on the political front.
Definitely. But they also recognize they need to strengthen the movement from within, you know?
How so?
Well, they mentioned that while lots of the current protesters are coming from states further afield, like Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, Haryana, Bengal, even the Northeast,
Okay.
they specifically need more local involvement, more people from Bihar itself joining in.
And anywhere else.
And they pointed out South India as a region where involvement in these protests hasn't been very significant so far. They're looking for broader support geographically within India.
Interesting. So trying to build a wider, more unified national front for this.
That seems to be the strategy, yeah. Engaging politically, increasing presence, and broadening the base of active support.
So wrapping up this deep dive then, we've looked at the Mahabodhi liberation movement in India. It's this long-running effort really focused on one thing, getting administrative control of the Mahabodhi Vihara in Bodhgaya.
The place of the Buddha's enlightenment.
Back into Buddhist hands.
Yeah, and we've seen it comes from this deep desire to reclaim the temple management from, well, a very long history of Hindu oversight.
Right.
It's framed as an issue of fundamental Buddhist rights and preserving their most sacred heritage site. And despite the temple's huge global importance to Buddhists, that 1949 act set up a management committee, the BTMC.
With that built-in Hindu majority.
Exactly, which remains the central point the movement is fighting against still today.
And it's clearly not just a historical issue. As we discussed, the struggle is very much alive with these ongoing sustained protests happening right now.
It really highlights, doesn't it, the complexities that come up when you have these incredibly significant religious sites with deep meaning for different groups.
Yeah, overlapping histories.
Overlapping histories, different claims, different communities involved. It really makes you think about the bigger picture of religious freedom, cultural preservation, minority rights.
Definitely.
And it leaves you, the listener, with something to chew on, I think.
Yeah.
When you have these sacred spaces, places with such layered, sometimes contested histories, how do societies figure out the best way to manage them? How do you honor the past, respect everyone involved now, and ensure fair representation for all the stakeholders? It's not simple.